All right, Logonomics, a simple logo design framework made by me, Zaid. So I used to work in Kuwait's largest branding agency, and we used to make $50,000 identity design systems. And I was the lead brand strategist and strategic art director. So by the end of this presentation, you're gonna have all the knowledge you need to create $50,000 logos. Let's start. So you can click on any of the sections, and then my face takes you back to the contents. The limits of my words are the limits of my world. I let that sink in for a moment. But this is one of my favorite quotes because when you gain a specific and technical vocabulary, you can create value because you can start talking about this. So this is the goal of Logonomics, is to bridge the designer's vocabulary with the entrepreneur's vocabulary. And I'm going to show you how in a second. But what are logos? Logos are as meaningless to users as bells are to dogs. So what does that mean? If you haven't heard of Ivan Pavlov, he's a psychologist who basically rang a bell and put food down for a dog. And he did that multiple times until the sound of the bell created the hunger or like the salivation, all the food associations that the dog had with the bell. But in the beginning, the bell had no value. Same thing with logos. In the beginning, your logo has zero value. But as you start adding value, serving customers, the logo starts to get all that value. And when people see the logo, it now means something. So the goal for a logo is to create something that is not complex, easily identifiable, basically, and very distinctive. So a very low and, not distinctive, like low on complexity, low on distinctiveness is kind of just a blob, right? It's not that distinct because it doesn't have a shape. High distinctive, low complexity is like a square, right? Or a circle. What you want is that high distinctiveness and kind of in the sweet spot of complexity, because too complex is like, a picture of a tree. It can be any tree. It's not that, you know, it's gonna lose distinctiveness as it, becomes more and more complex. So you want to find that sweet spot, and I'm going to show you plenty of examples so you know what this means. The beginning of wisdom is the definition of words. This is Socrates. Let's start defining them. So a logotype is the logo when it's a word. And that's kind of the most common logo style that you're going to see. A logo mark kind of stands in for the name. But the name is really what this bell thing is all about. Because at the bare minimum, they're going to remember your name. That's, an identity starts with a name. So you want to stylize your name to kind of anchor that name in people's minds. The logo mark, like we said, is like the Nike symbol. It stands in for the name. A mascot doesn't have this kind of distinctiveness, low complexity situation. It can be Michelin Man, good mascot, all these like characters, fantastic mascots. I'm a big fan of mascots, obviously. This is not a logo. This is a mascot, really. The lockup is when you put it together. So you put the logo mark and the logo type. The whole thing together is called a lockup. And a shape, identity shape. This is, everybody knows this is Coca-Cola. And This is kind of the highest level of branding. If you can be associated with a shape, like Apple has the rounded corners, that's kind of high level stuff. But this is kind of the vocabulary, so you can start being more precise with your words. The presentation is going to go through these. Is it archetypal, the style? Simple is kind of to remember. But the impression, is it interesting? Meaning, is it metaphorical? Precision, is it professional? Legibility, is it easy to read? Expression, is it good looking on things? If you answer yes to all of these things, you have a good logo. If, the more no's you get, the less powerful or useful the logo is, because the end goal is to make it so easy to remember that you can start associating value of your brand. So this is the logonomics scorecard. I tried to make it simple for you so you can give yourself a score. And each factor has 4 kind of sub-factors. And this is like a checklist. You can go through and you can see what's missing and try to like boost it up so you can get 21 out of 21. Style, obviously, you want to stick to one style. You can probably get away with 2 styles, but I'm just going to show you examples of one style, or maybe you can make the case for other styles. And this is subjective, really. It is more objective than I like this logo. That is not a good reason to pick a logo that you like it. It has to reinforce some stuff. So let's get it. Style. Is it archetype? First things first. What is archetypes? Archetypes are common patterns of meaning. So if me and you share a common meaning, there's like an archetype there. Let's go through it one by one. Luxury, royal, affluent, Cartier. You can see how instantly you get this kind of feeling of, oh, it's luxurious. They're using like an old typeface, serif. The lines, the thick and thins are beautiful. It's very flowy, you know, but it's refined as opposed to beauty, which is like, I guess I do say refined here, but it's kind of more funky than a luxurious brand. There's like a little bit of, mystique to a beauty brand. Then you kind of go down natural brands. You have like, very natural shapes. This is like Volvic is a water brand, so it's kind of very flowy. Uh, and this is, kind of like I said, it's subjective. It's what you define as these things. Uh, but it needs to be reinforced visually. Adventure brand. This is the tourist, I think, logo for Peru. Peru is a beautiful, beautiful country. Highly recommend you visiting. I've been there, Huacachina, 10 out of 10, but this is not a presentation about Peru. But as you can see, it's very adventurous. Like, there's like, uh, it's kind of like a trail. It, it gives you that impression, right? And then Disney, obviously, very stylized, very bubbly, it's like kind of the epitome of a joy brand. Then you got a little more gaming, it's a little more from another world, I kind of call this play. Then you got your competition brands, which are very angular, super speed, and all of that. And finally, the power brand, which is, kind of monumental when you think about it. Dominating, aggressive is what I say. This kind of gives you a feeling for it. Like I said, the more you kind of look at logos, the more you're going to start to see things fit in these categories. Uh, Power is kind of like in between. These are like in between brands, right? Like play is kind of in between joy and competition. Adventure is kind of in between nature and joy. And beauty is kind of in between the luxury and nature, right? So, on your vertical and horizontal axes, you got I guess, the primary archetypes, and then you got secondary archetypes on your, uh, I guess, what's it called? Angular vertices. Let's just keep moving on. You know what I mean. Okay, so let's do a little exercise. These are the styles. This is a rebrand of the US Open. When you look at this, you don't think competition. It's kind of maybe power, you know, perhaps luxury, but it doesn't reinforce the brand, which is competition. And I think Pentagram did this. I forgot who did this, but they paid definitely somewhere around $100,000 for this logo. So, it's a small change, but you can see it reinforces the brand, which is a competition brand. Moving on, impression. Is it interesting? You don't have a second chance to make first impression. So you want it as interesting as possible. So this is how you make it interesting. Does it stand out from the competition? Is it different? So Haagen-Dazs, was introduced where, all the ice cream brands were kind of made for kids. They had this kind of fun thing. And they were like, let's make it a sophisticated, German sounding brand. And they have this like, and it stood out from the competition. Haagen-Dazs is not a German brand. It's made by some guy from New York, you know, but he was like Italian guy from New York. He was like, let's go, Haagen-Dazs. Is it memorable? Does it use minimal repeating elements? So if you see the golden arches, it's the same thing. This is the same as this. And the more minimal and repeating shapes you can kind of use in your logo, the easier it is going to be for people to remember it at first impression. Like a good test for this is to show someone your logo for like 5 seconds and then hide it and say, draw my logo. And if they can't do it, you're not getting this checkbox. Dunkin' Donuts, does it set the mood? Dunkin' Donuts is kind of like, the it's popular in New England, it's popular in cold places, so they want this like kind of lift you up feeling to it, and they do that perfectly with their color scheme, their little bubbly font. It sets the mood perfectly. It's cheap. It doesn't say luxury. It doesn't say any of that. So you want to set the stage with your colors, fonts, and images that you use in your logo. And finally, you have familiar. Does it use symbology that customers recognize? So the Beats by Dre looks like the product. This is the headphone on the head. So is it familiar? Does it use symbology that the customers recognize? So let's look at this rebrand, the Co-op. I think this is like a grocery store in England. So first, you want to do the check. Does it stand out from the competition? Is it different? This is the old logo, kind of not that distinctive. New logo, super distinctive. Is it memorable? Does it use minimal repeating shapes? It's like all repeating shapes. It has like a symmetry to it. Just they cross this. Like if they can get, two check marks for memorable, they can get two check marks. Does it set the mood? I think it does. Like the color is kind of says cheap a little bit. It's not gonna be like a luxury brand, grocery store. So it's the everyman's grocery store. It's the Co-op. I think it says the mood perfect. And then is it familiar? Does it use symbology that the customer recognize? Probably not, you know. So it gets like a 3 out of 4, maybe like a shopping cart or something, they could have snuck in there. But in terms of like the rebrand, this was like it wasn't different. It wasn't that memorable. It didn't set the mood, and there's nothing familiar. So like 0 out of 4. This was like a 3 out of 4. Maybe the 4 circles mean something, to the customers. I'm not in their market. So, but this is definitely a better transformation. Is it metaphorical? Simplicity is about subtracting the obvious and adding the meaning. Subtracting the obvious is, if you can do that, you can have a career in everything because it's about nuances and subtlety. That makes things beautiful, I think. So, how do you create meaning? First, with stories. Are there any cool stories embedded in the logo? So, this is the Girl Scouts logo, and the three, they call it a trifold or something like that, represents the three promises that they make. And then embedded in the Girl Scouts are every kind of girl. They got the dark haired white girl, a black girl, maybe this is like a blonde girl, and it's like kind of showing like unity. So it's super cool. It has like a story in it, with the trifold and the representing all women. And then does it reinforce the purpose of the business? So for Amazon, you got customer satisfaction with the smile, and then you got everything from A to Z in the store. So if you can have your logo do that, amazing. Heritage. Does the logo say anything about its founders? So Nestle is the founder's last name is Nestle, and it means nest. So they use kind of the nest to reinforce the heritage. And then, is there more than one meaningful element? Like, so yes on this one, yes on this one. This one kind of just uses one. And then with the Apple logo, there were the Rebel brand, right? So you got the bite, the first rebellious act from Adam eating the apple, and then they had uh I think the first computer, I think, to do all the colors. So they had all the colors on it. And then it reinforces the name too. Like the name is Apple and the logo is Apple. So it has a lot of density to it. Airbnb, perfect rebrand to kind of showcase this, right? So does it tell a story? Not really. Is there a strategy? Does it show the strategy behind Airbnb? Nope. Is there any heritage in there? I don't think so. Is there any density? Zero. With the rebrand, they kind of knocked it out of the park. And they even showed you like people, looks like a person, place. This kind of shape represents, the pin on the map. They have the heart symbol in there. They got an A, it's just 10 out of 10. So it tells a story for sure. The strategy, of, people, places, like this is kind of their strategy. And then the heritage is in the name, because it's not an air mattress anymore, but that was the original story is, put an air mattress in your apartment, have people sleep in it. So the name kind of has the heritage in it, and then the density is obvious. Precision, is it professional? So precision is the difference between amateur and professional, in my opinion. So how do you increase precision? This is where your graphic designer comes in. This is like where you're gonna score the least if you're not a graphic designer. And graphic designers that can do this, you know, knock it out of the park here, can charge insane amounts of money. Okay. Can the logo be drawn easily? We talked about this in the memory one. Easy shapes. MasterCard logo, 10 out of 10. Uh, are the empty spaces meaningful? So, the counter shapes. So you got the original shape, and then you got the shape that the shape makes. And FedEx has this, kind of hidden arrow in it that kind of shows the speed and like the movement and all of that. And it's kind of expertly done. Symmetry, is there any use of symmetry? Rotational, reflective, repetitive symmetry. We kind of talked about that too with the repeating shapes and all of that. But a great uh, graphic designer is gonna nail that for you. And as you can see, this one has reflective symmetry, and then you got the repeating shapes, inside the shell. And then finally, balance. Does the logo tip over on a pivot around the center of gravity? So if you imagine you had like a little seesaw, pivot, triangle and you put it right in the center. Is it gonna balance there? If it falls over other side, it's gonna look bad. And you can kind of do it for this side too. If you put, a little thing here, does it tip over? I guess not. It's classic. I was trying to make it fancier than it is, but no, it's the weight of it, precision. Okay, this rebrand perfect because the old Instagram logo was cool, but it wasn't easy. You can't really draw it, if you want to draw it on a thing. This is kind of what you would draw if you saw this, and they were like, let's just go. Easy spaces. They use the counter spaces very, very, very professionally here. Is it symmetrical? Hell yeah. Is it balanced? 100%. This one kind of has the balance. This is very balanced and kind of symmetrical, but it's not easy. Like the counter shape's not easy. The the shape itself, that has a lot of like these gradients and all of this. Legibility. Is it easy to read? Don't make something unless it is both necessary and useful, but if it's both, don't hesitate to make it beautiful. So this is all about usefulness. You can't have, in the end, the logo has to be useful in kind of this kind of memory recollection process that you're creating. So first things first, this is also another thing that a graphic designer can nail for you. First things first is hierarchy. What do you read first, and is it the most important? And if it's not, you're failing. So, here, imagine Milano was on top of Prada. It's not, Milano is a secondary thing to Prada. So this is kind of like a good way to think about hierarchy. Second, typography. Does the font kernel, which is the letter between the spaces, and leading, which if it's two lines is the space between the words, enhance reading. You want to enhance reading. So Illy, I chose this example because they use the lowercase I. And they did that because if they used that uppercase I, it would be confusing with the L's and it wouldn't be easy to read, you know. So they use the lowercase I. And you want to think about these things. Is it easy to read? Legibility. Is it easy to read? And am I using typography in a way that makes it easy to read? Sometimes people try to do fancy things with the logo type, and it's not easy to read. So I think that I can put myself instead of okay. Anyways, scale. You know, is it easy to read at a tiny scale, or is it identifiable as in a tiny scale? And Facebook has that. You can shrink this down and you can see what it is. And then the opposite of that is that if you blast it, you zoom in on one corner of it, like the Coca-Cola, can you still identify the logo? This is kind of harder to do, but that's where a great graphic designer comes in. So is the logo recognizable at a small scale? Can you identify it by only viewing a piece of it? Lastly, you got length. Do you have a symbol to stand in for a long name? And do you capitalize on short names? So if your name is Ralph Lauren, you can't really pull this off, like scale and all this other stuff. So you gotta come up with a symbol. And then if you have a tiny, four-letter name, use it as part of the logo. You don't need the symbol because you can shrink it, make it a square, and do all of that. And Ford is a good example of that. Like you can see this and be like, "Yep, that's Ford." All right. So this is now we're on Olympics Paris, but I picked out these Olympics because this was a disaster when it came out. Uh, London is so tiny, and it's kind of Olympics and kind of in terms of hierarchy, you want to show the location first. Uh, obviously the Olympics logo itself is iconic. It's 10 out of 10. You can put it anywhere and you'd be like, yep, it's the Olympics. People tag their name on it. That's coming up. But so let's take Beijing, right? The hierarchy, great. They got the symbol that stands in and you can blow it up and all of that. Beijing, 2008, fantastic. It tells you the year. Is it easy to read? The Beijing is kind of not that easy to read. They're kind of using, so maybe they don't get fall. Yeah, this, their little symbol, the logo mark. You can blow this up, make it super tiny. You can kind of always get it. The only thing that's kind of, they could have made it more square because you can fit that in more things. And then, do they have the mark to stand in for a long name? Yes, they do. This is the disaster, because this is supposed to say 2012, but it's not easy to read. The hierarchy in this is like, where does my eyes go? Kind of, it goes Olympics, but you want it to go London, you know? So they kind of botched that, because the Olympics is a tourism marketing thing. Like it brings all these people to these areas, and you want to kind of advertise London. So hierarchy, they failed. It's not easy to read. The 2012, I guess, no, it's not that simple. The shapes, so you can't really blow it up and whatever. I think you do lose legibility a little bit. You can blow it up, like it's very angular, so maybe I can give them a check mark here. And then it's too complicated, I think, for tiny mark. You're just gonna see blobs. It's not that distinctive. Rio, they kind of nailed it. They have a simple, three character logo, 10 out of 10. The shapes are simple, the counter shapes are simple. The hierarchy, Rio, it's huge. It's easy to read. You can blow this up, you know. And they got the mark. Rio 2016 is also, but they didn't do Rio de Janeiro. They just did Rio. 10 out of 10. You aren't advertising to a standing army, you're advertising to a moving parade. This is from the master, David Ogilvy. And what this means, why I put it here as a reminder, is no one's really sitting there and, you know, analyzing these things other than designers and lunatics like myself. Most people are just in passing, and you want to catch them in passing. So this is kind of where the expression comes in, right? Is the logo optimized for all sizes and applications? So if you have a billboard, everything on the billboard should be able to be read miles away, right? If you have packaging, you should be able to tell what the logo is in the packaging in the aisle. When you're like shopping, you need to be like, well, that's nuts.com. So where the logo is going to be seen is very important, and you got to optimize for that. If your logo's tiny and you can't see it in the packaging, it's not good packaging. It's not good logo for a packaged good, because you're gonna be like, what is that? So think about that dynamic. Is the logo optimized for all sizes and applications? Adaptable. Can the logo take on meaningful variations? So this is Matt. I think it's a museum, and they kind of changed the background for the different exhibitions, but you can see it's still, recognizable. It satisfies a lot of the criteria we already talked about. Pride. Are users proud to wear your logo on the weekend? That's kind of like, does your brand stand for something, and is the logo cool? This is the coolness factor. And finally, timeless. Is your logo worthy to be put on a monument? This is, IBM. You still see it was made in the 80s. Still looks powerful. Still looks amazing. And you can put it on a building. Imagine $100 million building. Can you put your logo on it? That's a good logo. So MIT Media Lab rebranded. This was their old thing. Was it dynamic? Is it optimized? No, because you know you kind of have to go in and read it to kind of recognize it. And this was, it's so complicated. It has like gradients in it, overlapping things. Adaptable. Can the logo take on meaningful variations? They kind of tried to do that where, it shoots different ways and has different colors, but it's always anchored in those like three dots and whatever. But it didn't, like, people didn't know what they were doing. It just looked like they had different logos. So no. Pride, what are you gonna tattoo? If people can't recognize your logo, you're not gonna be able to tattoo or wear a hat or something like that. Timeless, not that timeless. It looks very 90s. You know, they rebranded to the MIT Media Lab with that, and this is all their departments. It kind of uses the same design language, so it's very adaptable. Uh, Dynamic. You can put it on a lot of things. You can, put it on a t-shirt, tilt it, make it a heart. Amazing. Then and it's Media Lab reinforces the whole thing. It's so simple that if you have strong ties with the media, I'm sure someone has a tattoo of the Media Lab, but you don't mind wrapping it, with a t-shirt or a hat. Timeless, for sure. It's like two shapes. They've been making shapes since prehistoric times. All right, that's it. That's the Logonomic scorecard. I put it all here. You can download it from Gumroad, fill it out, and it gave you some exercises here to kind of go through it. It's 30 minutes. I wanted to do it in less than 30 minutes, but if you have any questions, please DM me. Thank you so much for your time.